clock has struck 5:03. Let's go ahead and get started. Just want to open up by saying thank you so much for taking time out of the end of your day. For many of you, maybe our friends on the West Coast still have an hour or two left to work. It means a lot to join something like this for an organization like Family Farm Action, to have great allies and the trust that you all show in us to do this sort of thing. My name is Cody Atkinson. I am the Policy and Political Director for Family Farm Action. So I do a lot of the, used to be on the ground organizing work, and now it's Zoom organizing work. I've been with Family Farm Action now since 2017, just shortly after it was first founded. Joe decided to give me a title after working with him down in Oklahoma in 2016. We've done some really incredible work since. Maybe our biggest piece of work that we did almost immediately out of the gate was removing the King Amendment from the 2018 Farm Bill. Many of you likely signed on to that Farm Bill, or against that amendment within the 2018 Farm Bill. That may be why you wound up on the email list that brought you here today. I want to say thank you for that. In the end, what Family Farm Action hopes to accomplish is a more democratized food system in which farmers and ranchers in rural communities see that economic revitalization that is going to be so necessary to bringing back those communities and the beauty of those communities. With that being said, I want to hand it off to Joe for a quick intro, and then I will get the training started.
Thank you, Cody, and I want to thank all of you all for participating this evening, and hope that you find this of value. We do appreciate your work with us over the past, and we hope to be able to continue that in the future. The goal tonight is, whether you are a leader of an individual organization or you're joining us tonight as an individual, we hope that you'll find that this presentation and training will be helpful. Our objective is that you will be have better knowledge and understanding about how to talk to your neighbor, or if it's in front of a hearing at the city council or the county commission, that you will be able to be better prepared to tell your story. The methodology that will be presented tonight is methodology that we have tested in the field and have used, and we have found that it does move individuals to promote or support positions and issues that Family Farm Action and many of you all have joined together in the past to support or to oppose. So we hope you enjoy the training, and thank you again for participating here this evening.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right, so today we're going to be covering what we call our Hearts and Minds training. We call it the Hearts and Minds training because those are really the two focal points that you need to appeal to. And it's hearts and minds, or at least hearts then minds, because you need to make that emotional appeal before you can get voters to change their minds. So today we're going to be covering several different areas, including just a little bit more about who Family Farm Action is, the work that we do, the reason behind the work that we do, why we are all so passionate about changing our food system in a way that gives that economic opportunity and fights for an inclusive economy. Next, we're going to cover our specific approach to messaging. That is that values-based approach that we find so valuable in cutting across those political divisions that have really damaged a lot of those community-based movements. We don't believe that there are two warring camps necessarily, just some folks who disagree on issues that can be brought together by their shared values. Next, it's going to be a basics. It's not going to get you to go out there and give a rabble-rousing speech in front of a crowd of thousands, or at least, you know, if that happens, that would be wonderful. But just remember throughout today that nothing is going to come out perfect, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good. finding your why. So Joe touched a little bit on this, but the why is kind of that core of why you are here today, why you believe or do the work that you do, and really sussing that out and developing a way to speak around your why and your story ultimately is what we are hoping to give you the tools to work on in the future. So next up, we have a quick introduction video to Family Farm Action. As I said, I joined just shortly after Family Farm Action was founded in 2017. The belief is that rural America needed some political muscle on more progressive issues to fight monopoly power and support independent producers, ultimately with the goal of getting back an inclusive economy. So here's a video.
The way I always thought about a farmer is somebody who can select the right plants and animals, the right crops that are suited for the place where he is, and how to raise those economically. Now those decisions are made by corporations.
We can have whatever kind of agriculture we want. All we have to do is develop policy that promotes it. And what we've seen over the last 30 years is a policy that promotes big ag, as we call it, and gives them better tax breaks, better opportunities for efficiencies than it does family farmers in the U.S.
We no longer have a real competitive market. It completely eliminates any control at the local level.
We just don't have any markets. There's no true price discovery, and then you have maybe one buyer for the grain. You know, they can penalize you for quality, for protein, anything they can dream up to even discount the grain even further. And you have no options, but you take what they give you or not at all.
It leaves farmers trying to get a piece of the pie that they can't get because it's being sucked up by all these corporations that just keep taking it over. And a lot of times, these corporations are foreign owned, and that leaves people at a real disadvantage.
China is the largest pork producer, controlling 25% of all the pork in this country.
Over half, at least, the hogs in Marion County are basically owned and finished by the Brazilians.
That money is extracted from rural communities and winds up on Wall Street and in the pockets of these foreign corporations.
I'm supposed to compete with a foreign government that now owns 1 of every 4 hogs in the United States of America. They're the largest owner of poultry in this country and the largest owner of beef, and U.S. producers are supposed to be able to compete with them.
The corporations have come in and they have what's called a vertically integrated model. They own the animal from birth all the way to pork chop, and they control those animals not only to compete against the farmer themselves, but they do that on the backs of family farmers who mortgage their homes and all their farms to build the millions of dollars worth of buildings for those animals to be housed in.
A lot of what contracts look like remind me of when you go back through history and read the sharecroppers contracts. It's kind of a modern plantation system, but now you're beholden to the bank and another group. You know, you got 2 different groups that you got to try to please all the time.
I mean, you lose your family, you lose your kids, you lose your school, you lose you lose your town, and it just goes on and on and on.
So if you borrowed against your home, against your livelihood, and against your farm, they don't have to negotiate with you, they own you.
My granddad would have never, ever believed that they lived in a country that with their soil, their toil, a seed that they bought and planted, when they got done, wasn't theirs.
Corporations don't care about rural communities. Neighbors care about each other and they take care of each other in those rural communities, but corporations, they don't care.
In Oklahoma, a quarter of our school districts only have school 4 days a week because of budget problems. Whenever your schools aren't open, it's a sign that there's a very serious problem in your rural communities.
The farmer doesn't have the income to support the rural community. It's kind of like when I was a kid, the local farmer supported the hardware stores. There's no hardware store now. You got to go to Walmart to try to get a shovel.
There used to be local businesses that were built around receiving the products from the farms. And there were local businesses built around providing products to the farmers. And those are going away. And it just hollows out the rural community.
I'm Joe Maxwell. I'm the president of Family Farm Action. I'm a family farmer from the state of Missouri. My brother and I started to farm in the late 70s. We had the best opportunity that America had in almost a century. It's worse today than it was in the early 1900s.
The hope and the dream of America is still present. The people haven't given up the idea that they can make it. There has to be equal opportunity. And that's how we'll all work together to continue the American dream.
How do you win back rural America as Democrats? You stand for something. Get off the fence. You get on one side or the other. The Republicans already own the other side.
There are folks out there who see the same things that we see, which is that these communities are struggling and that rural America needs really their rights back. And they need to take them back, you know, from the government, but also from corporate agribusiness and from all those that have more money and more power and more influence.
We should have a right to open free market. We should have a right to our own seed. We should have a right to these things.
We need a Farmers'
Bill of Rights.
So I hope that video shows just a little bit more of what we stand for as an organization, as well as points out a lot of the problems that we are trying to aim to find some policy solutions, but that policy doesn't move without people powering that change, talking to their neighbors, talking to their local elected officials, and really creating that groundswell from the grassroots up. So that's what we hope. In the end today, we help a little bit to get you towards showing that folks can make a difference at the local level and sometimes just need a little bit of nudge. But why do we want to do this in the first place? We had a pretty good idea that we were on to the right policy solutions. We thought, you know, just speaking to folks and seeing how things were, it seemed like we were on the right track. So we had our friends over at ruralorganizing.org. They were putting a poll into the field. We asked if they could include a couple different questions for us. They did a wonderful job doing that. And it got back to us that 82% of rural voters have a favorable view of farmers and ranchers. You can't find that consensus and that sort of trust in a demographic anywhere else. This was higher than the military, higher than local police, higher than local teachers, really tremendous amount of trust in that farm voice. And even if you aren't a farmer or rancher and you're on this call trying to reform the food system, there is an incredible level of trust brought from that voice to voters to affect change. But on to some of the issues. 86% of rural voters believe only a handful of mega corporations control our food system. That is just cuts to the very heart of what we see as the problem, and that is that corporations, oftentimes multinational corporations, even foreign owned, are making decisions about how we raise our food, what we plant, without any local input. And that can get into some very dangerous territory. But in addition to that, it has absolutely washed out our rural communities. And a lot of folks have just left due to lack of economic opportunity. 87% of rural voters believe that those who work hard should be able to get ahead. That's a no-brainer. Anybody who has worked on a farm, anybody who has worked anywhere and got that sweat on their brow or buried their nose in a book knows that hard work should be rewarded, and it should be rewarded no matter what that work happens to be. If you work hard, you ought to be able to get ahead. And going back to that second bullet point, this last one kind of sums it up. They believe that the deck is stacked in favor of large corporations, not independent farmers. Again, there is this incredible level of concentration within the ag sector that has created this level of distrust and a lot of resentment that we aim to fix. So next up, we're going to talk about how we approach things. That is through values, not issues. The values, they are the principles behind that policy. They start to get at the why you support these different policies. What makes you care about the changes you are seeking? We just don't see that issues have the soul needed to change the minds of voters. So I'm going to hand it off to Joe. But before I do that, I hope you all appreciate my grandpa feeding a goat that just wasn't being taken by its mother. But Joe, go for it.
Thank you, Cody. One of the things, as Cody said, the first thing that we want to impress on anyone that we work with is to remember, while we're very passionate about passing a bill, or we're very passionate about a specific issue, it could be environment, it could be healthcare, it could be healthy food. We're passionate about our issue. Issues do not move people. It only causes people to get into a conflict. If the person disagrees or is on the other side and you start off with the issue, then they're automatically digging in because you're on opposite sides. So you lead with values. Values are the principles, like Cody said, who you are, what value you share. I'm going to give you one quick example. In Oklahoma, we were taking on an issue, the right to farm issue. 64% of Oklahomans supported the right to farm initiative that was on the ballot. 64%. 15% opposed it. It would have allowed industrial agriculture to have a free slate to do whatever they wanted. It was going to put in their state constitution, in their Bill of Rights, the right for industrial modern technology, and that the state government and local governments could not regulate it. So they were going to be able to build whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, however they wanted. 64% of Oklahomans supported it. Why? They, as the polling showed, they like farmers. So it's the right to farm. So we were working to develop a value base with a large constituency group made up of the Sierra clubs, the humane societies, the various organizations that cared about not allowing industrial ag to have that power. And what we did there was we recognized that in Oklahoma, a core value to Oklahomans is their heritage and their tradition. Look at their state seal. It speaks of their heritage, both the white community, but as well as the Native American community. Their seal is very open to this heritage of Oklahoma. So instead of talking in the Sierra Club when we work to train them, instead of talking about pollution and parts per million and how much manure made a stream oxidize and kill all the fish, we wanted to talk about the values. And what we learned was from one gentleman, I'm sitting there in a meeting, and he said, you know why I care? And I said, no, why do you care? That was what having a similar presentation. He said, because I won't be able to take my granddaughter and sit under that big tree like I did with my granddad and fish in that stream. He said, that's why I care, because I won't have that, my granddaughter won't experience that same tradition with her grandpa. At the end of the day, and on that election day, 60% of Oklahomans agreed they wanted to preserve their tradition and their values, and they voted no. And we carried every congressional district in Oklahoma. And it's there's very little blue there. There's very little progressive organizing there. It's mostly conservative, libertarian spirited individuals. So value-based messaging, that's an example of how we turned this issue around on industrial agriculture. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you. So now to get down at the bone of this, what we call the golden circle, your what, how, and why, kind of working backwards here. Everybody knows the what. We know what we do. The Sierra Club, they know what they do. Sherry, SRAP, they know what they do. It's the issue they support. If it's environmental protection, conservation, education, healthcare, living wages, whatever it happens to do, they or whatever they happen to support, that is their what. Some organizations, they can dig a little bit deeper. They can tell you how they do it. That's what makes them special. We know our how. We kind of went over that in the video. But not every organization or individual can tell you why they do what they do. They can't tell you why they get up in the middle of the night to go to work. They can't tell you why they're spending 60 or 80 hours organizing an event. And when you find your why, everything starts to open up a little bit easier. And pointing back to our hearts and minds here, the why, that is what makes that emotional connection. Before you can get people to change their minds, you really have to find an emotional starting place for folks. If that's a personal story that you were able to tell about the time that maybe you went fishing with your grandparents, or the time that you had to call a neighbor over to help wrangle a cow that got out of their fence. You know, the why behind that sense of community, that pride and family values, that is so important in finding that through line that can speak to everyone. So with a little example here, I wanted to break this down because sometimes some of this can get a little bit too far away from us. In Family Farm Action, we know what we do. Here it is: creating organizational capacity through grassroots coalition building in rural communities across the country. Not very exciting. That's not plucking at anybody's heartstrings. Some people on the call here may have their eyes roll in the back of their head. But go on to the how. Maybe we scratch a little bit deeper. You get folks engaged. We focus on what independent farmers, ranchers, small businesses, and workers need to be successful in developing messaging and policies to bring about change. Maybe your ears perk up a little bit. That sounds like it's getting a little bit closer to why you may want to support whatever we happen to be pushing that day, or our overall agenda for an inclusive economy. But when we get to the meat of it, it's the why. Why do we do what we do? We believe that in our America, everyone has the right to share in the prosperity they help build, regardless of race, religion, or sex. It doesn't matter if in the morning you throw on your work boots or dress shoes, you should be able to get ahead. There is dignity in all work, and everyone who goes out, works hard, deserves to get ahead. You know, hopefully at that point, people are well aware of what you're saying. They get that through line. They understand the why and that value you were trying to convey, that sense of dignity of work, the value in hard work, the value in fairness. And they say, okay, I didn't think I was going to agree with anything this person said, but they sound exactly like I sound. And from that, you do your call to action. And that is, will you join us? Will you join me in making a phone call? Will you join me in going out knocking doors? Will you join me in writing a letter? Will you join me in just sharing something on Facebook? Something as small as sharing something on social media can mean so much to folks, to kind of coax them out of hiding if they are afraid that they may be the only one standing alone on an issue. So find that why. And here is another really good reason you need to have that why and that vision. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. When you have that vision, that shared value of fairness, it can bring about change that changes the world. You know, Dr. King may have just been an individual, but he inspired a movement that lasts through today and will hopefully last through tomorrow. You know, it may have gotten the Civil Rights Act passed in the 60s, but it is continuing his legacy that is so important. And hundreds of thousands of people showed up to watch him speak for his dream. Now, if he were to get out there and say, I have a 10-point plan for civil rights in America, not a whole lot of people are going to show up. It's just, you know, it sounds like another conference. It sounds a little too high level, like too many details are going to be out there, and it winds up looking like the most recent inauguration. So getting back to your touchstone, this is your why. It's the reason that you get up and out of bed. It's the reason hopefully you came here today to try to convince folks that the food system that you see is going to support their needs as well. So just some questions to ask yourself to figure out what your why is. Why do you support the issues that you do? This one doesn't scratch too deep, but it gets you thinking. You know, where did you learn your why? These things can come from your parents, your friends, your teachers, role models. Maybe it's a significant event in your life that really touched you and changed you and made you reflect back on life to touch down at your core of why you engage in things in the way that you engage them. You're trying to examine your core values when it comes to fighting for, maybe it's independent agriculture, where our work is mostly focused. Maybe it's workers' rights. Maybe it's the environment. Maybe it's healthcare. Whatever it happens to be, there is probably a very good reason. Again, maybe that parent, friend, whatever it happened to be, that taught you something that you still hold dear today, that you can examine, you can suss out, you can put it into that story. And ultimately, it's what motivated you to take action, whether that be at the just hyper local level, talking to buddies at the Casey's in the morning, or if it's, you know, going all the way to DC for a fly-in on whatever happens to be the petition you're trying to support or legislation. But it doesn't matter if it is that hyper local or if it goes all the way to the national level, that why and that value, it never changes. So when you are finding that why, when you think you've got it down, you can turn it into a story. Everybody loves stories. It's what many of us, you know, our parents or our grandparents started reading to us before bed, and those stories, they are how human history has evolved. And what do they allow you to do? Why are they so important? Well, they allow you to tell folks who you are. They allow you to share the moments that created your core value for the issues you're trying to convey. Just sharing that personal story, something that you know, maybe deeply affected you, but that lesson that you learned wound up being able to be shared by that community, which allows you to tell who we are, and that we means that crowd of folks that you may be speaking to. It may just be a couple folks at the diner that you're trying to convince to, you know, call a county commissioner or whatever it happens to be. But it's that shared DNA of that group. It's that community value that you find, where you can find those points of convergence. Next, you can teach a lesson. Share how you learned something through success or failure. Maybe you didn't care, say if it's a CAFO issue. Maybe at one point you thought, that's their land, I don't really care what they do, but now I do, because I found out that my aunt, when that CAFO moved in, she can no longer drink the water coming out of her well. She tried to sell her house to get away from the thing, but now it's not worth anything, and she'd lose it all because she didn't have enough of a retirement. So being able to teach that lesson and show that there is change that needs to be made, and creating that little bit of dissatisfaction with the present to motivate change. You can share those mistakes. You can make a case for change and create a vision for the future, much like Dr. King did in his dream. That shared vision that folks want to get on board with, that motivates them to come home at the end of their long day or their long work week and say, you know what, there's still work I can participate in, that I want to make change. And ultimately, changing the frame. You have to allow your audience to see a problem through a different lens by changing the emotional climate. So getting back to that, telling your story of who you are and that value that you hold, that also everybody else in this community holds, and changing the way sometimes those highly charged issues are. As Joe was pointing out, issues can be highly charged. Oftentimes they fall into just a handful of camps. Everybody goes to their side. But when you appeal to that emotion and you make that values-based statement, that is where change happens. That is when you get folks, just that little seed of change is planted. They may not believe what you're saying while you're saying it. They may not have their mind changed by the end of what you're saying, but if you can plant that seed for change, that makes all the difference in the world. So with that being said, I want to go to one of the greatest speakers of our time, former President Barack Obama. Whether you liked his policies or not, it is hard to deny the man could give one hell of a speech. This is 2012, just before the 2012 election in Des Moines, Iowa. Does a wonderful job telling a story that we will use then to develop your own story. So without further ado, here we go.
I got a powerful reminder of this myself on our last campaign. Folks in Iowa, I know you may have heard this story, but it was early in the primaries. We were still way down in the polls, and I think this office has just finally gotten the heat turned on. And at the time, I was still competing in South Carolina. It was one of the early primary states, and I really wanted the endorsement of a state representative down there. I'd met her at some function where nobody knew me, nobody could pronounce my name. They're wondering, what's he thinking? So I asked her for her endorsement, and she said, I tell you what, Obama, I will give you my endorsement if you come to my hometown of Greenwood, South Carolina. And I think I had a little bit of wine during dinner, because right away I said, okay. So it's about a month later, and I'm traveling back to South Carolina, and we flew in late at night. I think we were coming from Iowa. We'd been campaigning nonstop, traveling all through towns and having town hall meetings and shaking hands. And in between, I'm making phone calls, asking people for support. And so we land in Greenville, South Carolina at around midnight. We get to the hotel about 1 o'clock in the morning. I am wiped out. I am exhausted. And I'm dragging my bags to my room. Back then, we didn't fly on Air Force One, and the accommodations were a little different. And just as I'm about to walk into the room, one of my staff taps me on the shoulder and they say, excuse me, Senator. I was a senator back then. We're going to have to wake up and be on the road at 6:30 in the morning. And I said, what? Why? Well, you made this promise to go to Greenwood, and it's several hours away. And I try to keep my promises. So a few hours later, I wake up and I'm feeling terrible. I think a cold's coming on. And I open up the curtains to try to get some light to wake me up, but it's pouring down rain, terrible storm. And I take a shower and get some coffee, and I open up the newspaper, and there's a bad story about me in the New York Times. I was much more sensitive at that time to bad stories. I've become more accustomed to these now. And finally I get dressed, I go downstairs, and I'm walking out to the car, and my umbrella blows open, and I'm soaked. So by the time I'm in the car, I'm wet, and I'm mad, and I'm still kind of sleepy. And it turns out that Greenwood is several hours away from every place else. So we drive, and we drive, and we drive, and we drive, and finally we get to Greenwood, although you don't know you're in Greenwood right away because there are not a lot of tall buildings around. And we pull up to a small field house, and I walk in, and I'm looking around. I don't hear a lot going on, and the state rep. I got a powerful reminder. I got it fired up.
Sorry about that. I don't know why that stopped in the middle of the video.
I got a powerful reminder of this myself on our last campaign. Folks in Iowa. But I'm running for president, so I do. I got a powerful reminder of this myself on our last campaign. Folks in Iowa, I know you may have heard this story, but President.
Sorry about this, everybody. This is.
I'm shaking hands. I say, how do you do? Nice to meet you. And I'm making my way around the room, and suddenly I hear this voice cry out behind me, fired up. And I'm startled, and I don't know what's going on. But everybody in the room, this is a small room, they act like this is normal. And when the voice says fired up, they all say ready to go. And so once again, I hear the voice, fired up. And they say fired up. They say ready to go, ready to go. And so I look around, I turn behind me, there's this small woman, she's about 60 years old. Looks like she just came from church. She got a big church hat. And she's looking at me, kind of peering at me, and she's grinning, smiling, looking happy. Turns out she's a city councilwoman from Greenwood who also moonlights as a private detective. I'm not making this up. This is true. And it turns out she's famous throughout the area when she goes to football games and when she goes to rallies and she goes to community events. She does this chant of hers. She does it wherever she goes. So for the next few minutes, she just keeps on saying, fired up. And everybody says, fired up. And she says, ready to go. And everybody says, ready to go. And I'm thinking, you know, this woman is showing me up. This is my meeting. I'm running for president. And she's dominating the room. And I look at my staff, and they just shrug their shoulders. They don't know what to do. So this goes on for a few minutes. Now here's the thing, Iowa. After a few minutes, I'm feeling kind of fired up. I'm feeling like I'm ready to go. So I start joining in the chant. My staff starts joining in the chant. Suddenly I feel pretty good. And we go on to talk about the lives of the people in the room and their families and their struggles and their hopes for their kids and their grandkids. And we drive out, and it's still raining, but it doesn't seem so bad. And we go to our next stop, and for the rest of the day, even after we left Greenwood, even though we still weren't getting any big crowds anyplace, even though people still couldn't pronounce my name, I felt good. And I'd see my staff, and I'd say, are you fired up? They'd say, we're fired up. They'd say, are you ready to go? And they'd say, we're ready to go. And we brought that to Iowa. And during our rallies, this became a chant. And we'd have signs saying, fired up, ready to go. And the woman, her name was Edith Child, she became a celebrity. And she was written up in the Wall Street Journal. And folks did news stories on her. And this became one of the anthems of our campaign back in 2008. Now, here's the end of the story, though. We knew we were coming back to Des Moines for the last campaign rally I'll ever do for me. And so, you know, we were getting kind of sentimental, and we called up Edith Child. And we said, why don't you come on up? No, listen to this. We said, why don't you come on up? We'll fly you up from South Carolina, and you can do this chant one more time, just for old good time's sake. It's like getting the band back together again. And you know what Edith said? She said, I'd love to see you, but I think we can still win North Carolina, so I'm taking a crew into North Carolina to knock on doors on Election Day. I don't have time just to be talking about it. I've got to knock on some doors. I've got to turn out the vote. I'm still fired up, but I got work to do. And that shows you what one voice can do. One voice can change a room. And if it can change a room, it can change a city. And if it can change a city, it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation. And if it can change a nation, it can change the world. In Iowa in 2008, your voice changed the world. And Edith Child asked me to ask you that if you're willing to still stand with me tomorrow, if you're willing to get your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers to the polls tomorrow, if you're willing to make sure we finish what we started, she's pretty sure we'll win Iowa. She's pretty sure we'll win this election. And she just had one question for you, and that is, are you fired up? Are you fired up? Are you fired up? Are you fired up? Iowa, tomorrow let's remind the world just why it is the United States of America is the greatest nation on earth. I love you. Let's go vote. Let's keep moving forward. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
So I don't know about you, but that does certainly get me fired up and ready to go in whatever capacity that I need to. I guess, Joe, whatever I need to get done tonight, I'll just power through it and keep on going. But for you all, you're probably not going to be giving a presidential speech in Des Moines, Iowa, but you can still affect that change at the community level, at that personal level, with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors. And as President Obama was saying, that change is so important because that is the starting point of changing your state, changing the nation, and changing the worldview on these issues that we all care so deeply about. Again, if it's agriculture like we are fighting in, or if it is healthcare, or if it is workers' rights, all of that change can start with you, with this conversation, with this story that I hope to help you develop today and in the future as we continue to communicate. So translating such an immense speech to so many folks down to that community level, just to break this down a little bit. He started off talking about how tired he was. He'd been traveling everywhere. It'd been raining. He was getting that bad press in the morning. He's got a miserable drive to a lot of folks that he's not really sure that he even made that promise to, but he was going to do it anyway. So you can ask yourselves when you're developing your story, when have you persevered after a long day of work? When have you just been beaten down and worn out and thought, I'd just rather go sit on the couch, watch TV, throw my feet up, and then go to bed. But you decided, no, there's something important that I can be doing with my time. Next, he wanted to keep his promise. That at the base is what motivated him to keep moving. That was his value in all this, that he is a trustworthy individual, and he wanted to put that promise to reality. Then, who were you fighting for? For President Obama at the time, it was, the broader American people or democracy or a lot of these very large philosophical things. But for most of us here, it's not going to be about the nation as a whole. It's going to be about your kids. It's going to be about your mom. It's going to be about your neighbors. It'll be about the future, a cleaner environment in the future, or a future where folks aren't afraid to go to the doctor when they find a lump, or a future when folks don't have to depend solely on Social Security when they retire. What was he hoping to achieve? He was hoping to achieve another 4 years in office. That's why you go out and campaign as president. But what are you hoping to achieve? What change are you hoping comes about after you tell your story, after you convince your neighbors? Is that getting those, a higher level of permit before a CAFO moves in? Is that expanding Medicaid? Is it raising the minimum wage? What are you trying to achieve, and what can you call for and your call to action after speaking with somebody? So everybody has the do's and don'ts. These are very simple things to keep in mind. They're not the more deeper philosophical part like the why, but starting out, you got to meet folks where they are. This starts physically where they are, meeting folks at the Casey's, or if it's at a place of worship, or meeting them where they are on the issue. Maybe they don't agree with you already on certain issues. You have to recognize where they are and where they stand, and maybe why they believe what they believe at the time. If you go in there and you go over to this don't side and you insult somebody and say, no, you're wrong right out of the gate because this paper told me that X, Y, and Z happens when this happens, and you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to shut everything down right there. You're not changing anybody's mind. They're going to go home. They're going to tell their friends and family that you were just a jerk to them that day, and don't listen to anything you say. You are not their teacher. They are not your student, so you shouldn't treat them like that. Go ahead and butter them up. There is nothing wrong with some compliments. You walk in and you see Jim that morning when you're going to get your morning coffee and say, hey, Jim, I like your hat. I see your corn crops coming up nicely. That's a hell of a job you've been doing. What's your opinion on this? And then from there, you've already got their ears perked up. You probably made their day because the rest of the day they're probably sitting on a tractor. So feel free. And if this is something you go to, say, the city council or a town hall or something like that, always feel free. There is nothing, Joe will tell you, a politician doesn't love anything better than a little smoke blown at them. And tell them, thank you so much for engaging in the democratic process at a time when, all of us can't seem to look at each other eye to eye. When hyperpartisanship is taking control, you have decided to invite us here today and hear us out. And here's what I'm going to tell you. So feel free to give a little bit of compliment, even if you have to grind your teeth through it. If you're able to utilize humor, make a joke, maybe it's something happened in the community or some article in the local paper, use a little bit of humor. Again, this is just about getting folks to bring down that barrier to what you are about to tell them. Make everything as local as possible. Federal level stuff, that is way out of so many people's hands that it can seem like anything you do on that level may not ever be seen by anybody. So if you can make the issue local, make it about how it is going to affect them, how it is going to affect their schools, how it's going to affect their parents that are about to be moved into a nursing home. Make that a local issue. Something a little more basic, these last two, is using eye contact and staying loose in your movement. If you don't feel confident, or if you don't use eye contact, if you don't stay loose in your movement as you are giving a speech, it doesn't exude a level of confidence that brings folks into you. It makes it seem like you are already doubting what you're saying, and people will eat you alive. So it's tough. The biggest thing you can do to prevent that is just practice, practice, practice. Maybe it's starting with your partner, then your kids, or if you've got little ones at home and they don't understand what you're saying and they're in bed, go ahead and practice talking to them. On the don't side, a lot of these are just the reverse. So, again, don't insult anybody. Don't avoid eye contact. Don't be rigid. Don't use a monotone voice. It's a skill that is learned, public speaking, but you have to be able to use proper inflection when you speak. If you notice during President Obama's speech, he went from these kind of somber tones, tired, worn out, beat up, got this bad press, and I didn't want to do this. And then he got to the point where he was starting to get fired up. Maybe he spoke a little bit faster. It got a little bit louder. Couldn't wait. Now that he was fired up, ready to go, he was ready to get to Des Moines. He was ready to get another 4 years in office. And Joe will talk about this till the cows come home. Don't sit there and rattle off statistics. Folks, while they may care about those statistics after you give your story, if that's your opening salvo, they are just going to roll their eyes into the back of the head, pull that hat a little bit lower, and take a nap while you're speaking. So for the next 10 minutes, what I would love for everybody to do on their own, I'm not going to put you in a weird situation with folks, is put this to the test. Create your own story of why. And I've got a little situation for you. If agriculture is not your thing, feel free to come up with your own situation on how something related to healthcare or workers' rights or women's rights or anything along those lines, to come up with your own story of why. Again, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, where none of us here are about to go win any awards, and that's fine. You know, there's no judgment here. So the situation I've written up, it's something that happened in close to where I grew up in Lone Jack, Missouri. There was a CAFO that was being proposed. So in this particular situation, you're going to be speaking out against a proposed county measure in your county that would reduce oversight of fertilizer management of a local CAFO. This CAFO has a history of fines related to runoff issues. It's a hot button issue, as anybody will tell you who's been around the CAFO issue. Those communities are divided, and they've divided friends and family. So what I'd like you to do for the next 10 minutes is just jot down some notes on how you would tell your story of why and win the support of community members still on the fence. Afterwards, I'll have some folks volunteer if they'd like to volunteer and tell us their story of why. If you don't, that's fine. We can always communicate offline. I know, you know, we may not know each other well enough yet to share these sorts of stories, but I hope we do eventually. So let's see, it's 5:54 right now. Let's go ahead. Let's just do 6 minutes. That way we cut it off at a good 6 o'clock, and we can share our stories from there. So I'm gonna.
Cody, I wanted to add the one thing, and we'll try not to. Here's the big part of what we're trying to convey. I'm going to use healthcare as an example. This is something that sometimes we don't quite dig deep enough. As Cody said, we got to dig in to your why. This is your story. These won't be the same. There's no wrong answer. Every one of you has your own values, your own story to tell, your own basis for why that is your story. But here's something that you have to be careful of. Let's say it's healthcare. I go out and let's say we have a lot of work to try to get quality access to healthcare or advocate for Medicare for all. And I hear so many people say, well, my why is because people have a right to healthcare. But that's not your why. That's just stating healthcare again. Why do you believe they have a right to healthcare? It could be that you believe that when Sally punches that time clock and builds the prosperity of that company and prosperity on Wall Street, Sally should have the opportunity to share in that prosperity, and that includes access to health care, so when her kids get sick, it doesn't bankrupt the family. So the why is a shared prosperity value. It could be, your value may be, I believe we ought to care for each other. Why do I think we ought to have health care for everyone? Because I care. As neighbors and community, we care about each other. That's the why. But wish you well. We're here to help. Cody will take any questions through the chat, I think is what he said, and give it a go.
Give you till 6:05. All right, 6:05. So we'll bring it back here. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen for a minute so we can all have a little more personal discussion. I hope that was helpful for everybody. Get a little bit of time on that situation. Let's go to Kevin Fulton. Would you like to share your story of why?
Yeah, sure, I can do. I can do that. Can you hear me? I'm getting a real echo.
Yeah, I'm getting an echo too.
Kevin, you're on twice. You need to mute whichever one you're not talking on, and it won't echo.
Okay, I think I can do that. Hang on.
Or we'll have you mute all of it. But
yeah.
I know sometimes, the wildest thing, what Kevin tries to figure out, we're learning. Are you good, Kevin?
Well, I tried to leave on.
I can tell him what to do.
Okay, go. Yeah.
So Kevin, on your microphone, if you do it on a laptop or something, next to the microphone, there's a little up arrow pointing up. And so you click that to get more options, and you say leave audio, whether it's computer audio or phone audio. You need to turn one of those off on one of your.
I already left the meeting on my phone. Now I'm on my tablet. So
that fixed it right there. Okay.
Okay. So, I think this actually the situation hits close to home because we have a CAFO right near my hometown here in the community that is a huge problem. And so my story would be, I would tell the board or whatever that the situation affects the majority of the people in the community, and it's right along the highway 92 that goes clear across Nebraska. So thousands of people travel that road as they come down into the beautiful Middle Loop River Valley. One of the first things you see, and I've seen this numerous times here in the last couple months, is this ugly cloud hanging over the valley from this CAFO feedlot, cattle feedlot. And it has an incredible odor. And sometimes I've had to slow down to 30 or 40 miles an hour because the fog is so thick from this cloud that I, just to navigate down the highway. This particular CAFO sits about less than a half a mile from the river, the Middle Loop River. So it's very sandy ground, porous soils. And, the community gets their drinking water from that groundwater source, which is all connected. So that's a huge problem for the people in the community if the water gets contaminated. Also, there's a state recreation area about a half mile away where people swim and kayak and fish, and they do in the river as well. There's also the Loop City Airport is 3/4 a mile away, and so planes are coming in and out, and they have to navigate through this fog. So it's a safety concern. It's a concern as far as pollution. Driving on the highway is a safety factor. There's at least 6 rural homes within a half mile of this CAFO. So I would ask, is that how you want people to view our communities? That's what you want them to remember as they pass through the area, that, we live in a stench-filled community. And if you loosen the regulations, and that basically rolls out the red carpet for CAFOs like this to expand and to encourage other CAFOs to come into the area as well. And so you can, exacerbate the problem, tremendously by encouraging, situations that are the same. I mean, and bringing in more CAFOs. So then I would, ask them to not back off on the regulations and, stand firm.
So Kevin, when you're telling your story, your why in that statement was, I care about my community. I care about how people see my community. We have a, we have a good community.
And it's not just about me. I mean, I've never used the airport there. It's a small airport, but and I don't swim or kayak or fish. But lots of people do, and I can't imagine. And I don't live. I mean, I live 10 miles away, but you can start smelling this thing, you know, when you get within several miles sometimes. So, but I have friends that live within half a mile. I mean, I know all the people, and so you know, I think, you know, like I said, it's not. I mean, I can just pass through and hold my nose, but it's not just about me. It's a place I grew up, and you know, it's a place I plan on living the rest of my life. So, and my children might too. So, you know, and my kids go to school in that community. They drink the water, so that's a concern.
Yeah, I think what you did was a really great job in fleshing out all of these reasons that you feel a sense of pride and ownership over that community. You want your kids to have safe drinking water. You don't want that stench and that sight to reflect poorly on the community that you have so much pride in. I think, you know, that was a great starting point to develop your story into weaving a very powerful narrative about the reasons that, you know, it's not just that you personally oppose it, but this issue, this CAFO moving in and its lack of oversight is causing serious harm to the way that everybody lives their lives and the way that that community is seen now, but potentially going to be affected in the future for you and your family. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And one thing I would, just to kind of talk about this particular one, then I think Cody's going to go to another one. What we would suggest in our message development, Kevin has his why in there. We would suggest you lead with the why. And then you talk about these other issues. So Kevin we would suggest, you know, you start with, I'm proud of my community and I care about what others think about. And I care about my neighbors. I care about my neighbors. We're a community that cares about each other. And then you do the issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good point. And
Yeah,
I think that is important. And
yeah, and you have it in there, and a lot of people will get to their why. But if people hear pollution in the beginning or something like that, they tune you out. If they hear your why, I'm telling you, humans hear your why, your story. And if it's really yours, they're not going to argue with you. They may never agree with you on the issue, but they're not going to argue with you because it's your why.
good point.
Evan Fulton's a great person. We know him personally. We've worked with him. There's not a better farmer in America. Don't tell Will Harris I said that. But
Thanks, Joe.
and his why is deeper than the soils his livestock walk on. And no one will ever take that away from him or dispute that. And based on that why, based on that value, they'll open up to at least let him talk about why that CAFO shouldn't have less restrictions or whatever's going on in his community specifically. But start with that why. So, Cody?
Yeah, thank you again, Kevin. Anybody else want to take a crack at it?
I'll go, but I have a totally different issue.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for.
The issue that I wrote about and thought about is one that's really dear to my heart, and that's that in our state we have a huge amount, way too many children who have serious illnesses, and most of them are diet related. And I grew up very, very poor. I lived in 22 houses and went to 13 schools by the time I was in 9th grade. But I was also very fortunate that even though we didn't have very much, both my mother and father really understood that what we ate was really important for us. And so when we could spend any amount of time somewhere, my dad would grow a garden. And if he couldn't grow a garden, he was always dreaming about growing a garden. He loved farms. We were a tenant farmer a lot. We lived on farms. And so I got that love really early and that understanding of where my food came from and how important food was. On the other hand, my mom was always stretching that budget out, and I saw that look of poverty on her face through, you know, all my growing up years. And fast forward, I got to a place in my life where I had the ability to have any kind of food that I wanted. And because of what I had learned from my parents, especially my dad was in World War II. That's where his PTSD came from that caused us to move so much. He was adamantly against chemical farming from the beginning. I think he was one of the first people who got Organic Gardening Magazine and Mother Earth News, and he was always worried about our land and how that affected the people that ate that food and the animals and the farmers. I mean, I got that from the time I was young. So when I got to that place in my life where I had means, I always chose organic. And I've all of a sudden one day, I mean, I literally was driving through a parking lot with a bunch of wonderful organic food in bags in the seat behind me. And I remember stopping in that parking lot and I was feeling so ebullient and happy. And I thought, what are you so happy about? And then I literally stopped myself and I went, you're happy because you've got all this incredible food and it made you so happy to choose it and have it. And then right at that moment, it just overpowered me. And I thought, but look where you came from. You are so fortunate. And there's so many out there that, you know, and you're healthy because your parents knew what to do. But there's so many children out there that their families, they don't have the education, they don't have the access to food. And so right there in that parking lot, I planted my stick in that cement and said, I'm going to do something about this. And I'm still passionate about doing something about it and wanting nutrition education, especially. I've really come to this place where nutrition education is paramount for me, for every child in this state, because of the way they need to know what affects their bodies. They have the right when they're young, very young, to start understanding what affects their bodies, their minds, their emotions, and the land and animals around them. And so that's why I do what I do with the, you know, in this world, and don't feel any desire to stop doing it.
You know, one, for you all that don't know Noreen, she's one extremely talented, experienced organizer. We didn't have time for everybody to introduce each other, but Noreen has spent her lifetime organizing and now heads up the Local Matters group in Columbus, Ohio. Noreen, that was really well done. I'm going to kind of tell y'all, so her why and the story, and we wanted you, if you had something you really felt, you know, this is my issue, this is what I'm going to start developing my issue. So as a local leader within your organization, you started, as Cody talked about, Obama talking about the hurdles and the challenges, right? There's a slide I actually made him take out. But you followed the textbook to a T on if you're a leader in an organization and you're walking in to give a presentation, and these folks in this room, Angela will tell you what happens when the Farm Bureau shows up at one of your meetings. That was the first event I sent Angela off to one time. But these folks aren't necessarily with you, right? And you're going to convince them. The way in which Noreen, as opposed to like Kevin talked about his why on a specific issue to stop expansion of a CAFO, Noreen talked to us about giving the credibility of her why she was doing what she's doing. Those people in the end in that room that she was presenting to, maybe a group of, I don't know, cattlemen association people in Ohio, God knows they could use some talking to, but no one's going to argue that Noreen didn't have a right to stand up and try to sell her issues. She started with why she is who she is and the hurdles that she had to come over to get to where she was. And then she shared a moment when the light bulb went on, when she put her stake in the concrete. So that kind of why modeling that Noreen just went through is, Kevin Fulton does a good job. Kevin's still on. I know he's got a meeting here in just a few minutes. We appreciate him being on. Kevin gave a presentation at an organizational meeting conference that we were at and does a great job with that why, so that he is credible. People listen to him. They may not agree in the end, regenerative ag's the way to go, but you can't dispute his why he believes what he does. Noreen, that was very well done. And to go into a presentation, you gave them your why. Dr. John Eichert has he's on the, YouTube him or something, and tells, a similar why he believes what he believes. So spot on for, especially if you're going in to give that presentation about your organization, or then to do the issues, because you lent credibility. You exposed a piece of your soul. Remember, we used that word earlier in the presentation. You gave them a little bit of your heart and a little bit of your soul. And I guarantee there are a few people out there that need to be taken to the woodshed, but the overwhelming number of people, even if they oppose you on your issues, will accept and open up to listen to you with that kind of why statement.
Hey, Joe, this is Kevin. Could I add a couple things?
Yeah, Kevin. Kevin, is it okay?
Yeah. Okay. I was just going to say that I think for me, it's really helped, when you walk the walk and you demonstrate, what you talk about is what you're actually doing on your farm. It's given me the opportunities to speak at places from Los Angeles to, the Downtown Press Club in Washington, D.C., and the NYU School of Law, to a lot of different variety of unique groups. And when you show that you're passionate and you have convictions, and that I give the same message. I don't care if I'm talking to Farm Bureau members, which I've done. It might not go over real well, but I give the same message to them as I do a group of vegan animal welfare activists in Washington, D.C. And it seems to resonate, but you have to stand strong in convictions. And I'm out here. I'm the only organic farmer in my county. I'm the only person that raises grass-fed beef and grass-fed lamb and organic grains. It's not easy. And and politically, I'm on the, opposite side of 80% of the farmers out here. So it can get kind of lonely, but I think that it's important that we take our message beyond our borders of our farms. And I saw a thing by President Obama just the other day, and it said, a quote from him, and it said, "Whatever you're doing, it's not enough." And that really hit home with me. I mean, I think I'm doing a lot sometimes, but it's not enough. We all have to take that attitude. We need to do more if we're going to make changes.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. That is why we're here. It's to break down those borders and barriers that too much of us stay in our own little bubbles, as everybody calls them. But in the end, we're not going to get the change we want by just talking with each other. So I hope we can take these lessons over that way. Yes, Christine?
Just to feedback to Kevin, that last part that you talked about where you said, I'm an organic farmer, I'm the only one, and I'm an isolated place, and why I do it, that's your soul talking. If you would start with that when you were talking about the other thing, I wanted to mention that really pulled me in versus hearing the others, that you had lots of things to share. But there I heard who you really are right there.
A lot of times I'll start with the fact that my grandfather, who was born in 1871, he quit school in the 2nd grade to come home because his father had died, and he was needed to help. I get emotional about this, to help save the farm. And those values were passed on to my father and then down to me. So I want to do everything I can to help, save my farm and pass it on to the next generation and help other farmers do the same. You know, that's just, I don't know. So
that's your why, Kevin.
yeah.
And that made me start to cry just hearing you. So just sharing that.
And I tell people, I asked the crowd, what were you doing when you were 8 years old? I said, I was still struggling to get through kindergarten. You know, I wasn't thinking about farming, but, you know, but he was home working on the farm, and they were my grandparents were immigrant farmers that came in from Northern Ireland and then eventually started farming here in Nebraska.
Woo! Northern Ireland.
Yeah. County Antrim.
Kevin, me too. County Urbana.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish up. I think I've got 2 slides left. We've got about 5 minutes. Shouldn't take all that long. And then we'll let you all back into the world.
I had to speak on a webinar here and I just got done. So anyway, you want to, oh, thanks. You want to follow me down? I'll follow you down. Okay.
So just to finish up, here's our call to action. What we would love for you all to do is take these lessons home. Doesn't have to be tonight, doesn't have to be tomorrow. But we would love if you would help write a letter to the editor. I've got some sample ones written up that you can use, bring your own voice to it, and submit them to your local papers. The folks who read those are the ones that are the quote unquote swing voters. It makes a difference to see that in their local paper, somebody from their community speaking out on an issue. If you feel so bold as to want to make a video and post that on social media yourself, or something we would share, we would love that. That sort of video, it conveys so much to have an individual behind a camera, or in front of a camera rather, talking about issues and their values, and it just cuts so deep. So if it's, you know, focusing on a local story that affects agriculture and the food system, and go ahead and take a stand on that. Again, I can get you some sample op-eds to take or make that video. And then I'm going to send over some support sheets. They just kind of help explain or better suss out some of the things that we spoke about today. And then, you know, in the end, we would love for you all to make your own call to action and become your own little community organizers. Because, you know, I'd love for you all to put me out of a job, basically. The more folks we have working in the community level, the less work I have to do, and the faster I can get to raising bison and feel good about the state of the country. So if that is getting you, if you've got a petition you want folks to sign, if that is calling a county commissioner, if that is just asking a friend of yours to go home and talk to their family or parents about an issue, that is, again, where it all starts. And if you are if you felt this training was helpful, and you have friends, or if you're a membership organization, you feel that they would be helped by this training, please let me know. Again, I'm going to follow up this with an email. Love to get your feedback on this, so I'll send over a form for that as well. Any improvements we need to make, what kind of haircut you want Joe to get, all the good stuff. And then I'm going to finish off with a quote from Wes Schumeyer. Most of y'all know him. We can have whatever kind of agriculture we want. We just have to develop the policies to promote it. That, I think, just really gets right to the meat of it. You know, the system we have is working very well for the folks that are doing very well. And there's a reason for that. And we at Family Farm Action are working tirelessly to organize for a new system, a better system. And we hope y'all join that fight. And this photo is taken on my multi-generational family farm out in Odessa, Missouri. This is my wife and cow that we had to bring up because it wasn't suckling correctly. So thank you all so much. Joe, is there anything that you need to cover?
Well, if you want to know more, you can go to farmaction.us. My phone number is 573-721-0927, and it's available on the web. If you want to know more about our research and policy, You can go to our Family Farm Action Alliance group, and that is farmactionalliance.org. Or you can also contact me if you're having trouble getting through to us. But I want to thank everybody for participating. And Cody, thank you so much for your work, and good to see everybody and talk to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the night.
Thank you.